It's been a little while since I've done a chorale analysis, so we'll move on to do BWV 13.6. And normally we would do chord analysis after we did cadences to get keys and things, and then we'd look at remarkable stuff. Or if there were a lot of remarkable things, we'd do a video on that separately. I think we're going to talk about some of the cool things about this, at least one or two. First, and then if you want to stick around for a chord analysis and things like that, that'll come next. This won't take too long though. I want to point out that this chorale has 6 phrases, and the first 3 phrases are then repeated almost verbatim, and they're reharmonized in the second half. So our melody is right, and you notice that it's the same right here. So we could look at phrase number 1 and say that's A. And then 2, 3, phrase number 4, we'd call it A prime, because although the melody is the same, the chords are very different, the counterpoint is different, but it's a reharmonization basically, okay? And then here, the next phrase is different from the first phrase. Right? And it's very similar, just the very ending slightly different, but other than that, right here, goes down, right? So we would call this B because it's different from A, and then we'd call this one B prime because it's very similar but not exactly the same as B. And then the end, right? Right? Okay, fine. And here it's probably the most different because we have very different cadences here, but the beginning is easily recognizable as the same right here. And then it changes to give us a nice authentic cadence, but they're recognizable, again, different from what came before, so we give it a new letter here, and this would be C prime as well. And this is interesting because it feels like this is a repeat of this or a reiteration of this. They feel like they make 2 parts. Now, if you're in a second year theory program somewhere, sorry, first year actually, first year, you probably started to talk about cadences and then phrases and then structures like sentences and periods. And we know that a period structure is a section that has a less conclusive cadence, and then another section that's joined with that in a way because it has more conclusive cadence. And the most common ones of those are where, so you have like a first section and a second section, and this is less conclusive cadence, and this is more conclusive cadence, and we call that period structure. And then depending on if they're the same, then they're parallel. If they're the same length, then they're symmetrical and those kind of things. And we call this the antecedent, and we call this the consequent. Okay? Sometimes they call this question and answer. Now, if you keep studying this, you find that there can be other variations on this. That this is not, the most common one is a phrase and a phrase. However, there's something called the double period, where your antecedent has 2 phrases in it. It's so long that has an internal stop right here, and then it has an internal stop there. In other words, 4 phrases where the first 2 phrases make the antecedent and the next 2 phrases make the consequent. And we still look at this last cadence right here to decide if it's a period structure or not. And that's called a double period. 4 phrases, right? 2 and 2, but they still fall under these umbrellas. When we live in Wenatchee, Washington. I don't know if I should give that away or not. It doesn't matter. But if we want to go to Spokane, if we're taking a trip, that's longer than just like going across the river or just out of town. And so you'll probably stop in a place called Ritzville. It's a stopping point, like a cadence, but we know that's not our end journey of the first part of the trip. We keep going. So gas, restrooms, food, stop, Spokane. That's the cadence that or stopping point that matters. There's so long though, there's an internal spot. And then when you come back, you stop at Ritzville again, gas, washroom, food, and then come back home. Everybody knows that these internal stops are not the arrival points, okay? That's like a double period. Now here, it's really interesting because these two feel like, analogs to each other because the melody is the same despite the reharmonization. And if we look here at the end, this is all overall in B flat. If we look at the end of this third phrase here, we go B flat to F. That's a half cadence right there, okay? And at the end, it's different, and it goes F7 to B flat, and there's root on top, root on bottom, root here. It's a Chorale 5 chord, that's a PAC. And I can't help but feel, when I listen to this, that and this make two sections, right? This would be my antecedent, and this would be my consequent. And when you hear the melodies and you get used to it, you're not just going note by note by note, you actually hear that. And so this is kind of like a period structure, but instead of one phrase and one phrase, or two phrases and two phrases being a double period, it's got three phrases and three phrases. So triple period? Never heard of that before. I think that's really cool. So I'm going to put that in the title description, and I'm going to put triple period. Again, a lot of it depends on your perception. If this goes slowly and you end up here, and then slowly you end up here, and slowly you end up here, you might lose the continuity that this is this, and then it repeats itself with the reharmonization. But I think if you do it at a fast enough tempo, and if you know the tune well enough, then you hear it, and then it does feel like that. So, triple period, interesting. All right, let's get the rest of our cadences here so we can look at the keys. All right. By the way, if you're staring at this anywhere in red like this, these are voice leading, typical writing anomalies. Like we have a range thing. Usually bass doesn't go up to an E flat. I guess that's okay. Maybe they're very extreme, but we like to keep them around a D, Anyhow, I guess, it's getting up there, at least something to think about. Here, because of the line, we have greater than an octave spacing. Here we have cross voicing right here where the tenor comes down and then comes back up, and the bass goes up and comes back down. Bach does this a lot, even though we say that we don't do this. And here, to set up our final cadence and everything, we see that the alto line goes up and he decides to drop the bass down. I think it's because if he went up to the C, like if he went up to there, then he'd end up in parallel octaves like that right there. And he didn't want to jump down to the G, I guess, because, I don't know, he wanted to double, he wanted to get the E flat in there so we have the complete chord, I guess is the thing. Because otherwise you'd end up with C's and G's and you wouldn't know this is an A, C flat chord here. So there's a big jump here, partly to avoid parallel octaves and partly to give us the complete chord so we know what we're listening to. But that gives us, in order to maintain this line and to do that, gives us a spacing error, or at least an anomaly. We usually like to have an octave or less there. Okay, now cadences. We're in the key of B flat. Okay, starts on a B flat chord, ends on a B flat chord. Here's our first cadence, F7 to B flat. That's a 5. There's my 7 on top, F, A, C, E flat, 5, 7, going to a B flat chord, which is a 1. But this is not root position, so it's 6, 5, right? Because it's a third of the bass. And this is not root on top, so this is an imperfect authentic cadence right there. Okay? And that's good because it says, hey, we're going on, right? And then this is super awkward to play because the range there, you have to play this in the right hand, and then this skips down, and you got to grab that in the left hand. And it's just, it sounds great if I start right there, right? So I've got, like this, and then I have to scooch both like this, but then when I go to that next one, I have to like grab all 3 notes, bass and alto and tenor together, right? And then I have to go back down and grab the E flat and the alto again because I can't reach a 10th in my hand from the bass to the alto like that. So from a keyboard point of view, it's pretty, fearsome, right? And then, it's great. And you still have to keep changing hands too, so we can grab the 10th in the left hand, and then we get this interesting cadence right here, right? Or right there. It's a nice suspension, right, off of the D minor chord here, and we get ourselves a, what's this, a 7/6 suspension right there. But this is a E natural, canceling out this. This becomes a diminished chord here, and it's a 7 of F, cadencing on F. This feels like an authentic cadence, and we have another imperfect authentic cadence right there, except we've changed to the key of F, right? So we started in B flat right there. All right, and then the E natural goes away and we get our F with the 7th right there. So we've come back to the key here. So we went like imperfect authentic cadence, modulate to the dominant, imperfect authentic cadence, come back, but then do a half cadence. So we're really pushing forward. So this feels like it's incomplete here. So we're back to B flat. You can just immediately go to B flat, I think. I guess we should do these chords then, right? This would be a 1 in the key of F. This would be my 7 diminished. And since the 3rd's in the bass, 6 right there. My suspension 7/6 right there. D minor will be a 6 chord, right? This will be a 1 chord. And then these B flats, well, they're 4. They start off being 1 and then they change into a 4, depending on where you want to, change that out. And we have to think of ourselves in the key of F right there. Okay? But I think we jump right back. Like you can hear this as a 6 in the key of F, but then it's just, it's going to be like, becomes my 3, right? Or you can say my G minor becomes, it should be 2 right there, right? But in the key, this would be the 6 for the key of B flat. So we change key somewhere right here. Now we can think in the key of B flat. So this is my 5 chord. There's my 7. I can put a 2 there. This is my B flat with a 3rd in the bass. So it's a 1, 6. And this is root position 1 right there. It's a nice little escape tone right there. Steps in, skips out, right? And we have a half cadence right there, which we already have right there. And we're going to put ourselves back in the key of B flat. Okay? All right. So we know this is a redo. This is a really interesting section here because he reharmonizes, and he's not just random. He's going to places that are expected and doing it in interesting ways. So let's think about this for a minute. This is in flux. You could interpret this a bunch of different ways, but when we get to the end of the cadence right here, we have a C minor chord here with a nice suspension that happens right there. It's really cool sounding, right? And then so that's a C minor chord, and then it goes to this G chord right here, right? Okay, G major is weird. We wouldn't normally be there. There's 2 things at work here. One is that he's doing a 5 of G minor coming off of here. And G minor is the relative major, or minor, to the B flat major, so it kind of makes sense. But then it becomes a G7 chord, which is a 5 chord form, which pushes us to C minor, and then this would be a half cadence. In minor keys, or minor chorales, we often end the minor in a major version of the chord, modally borrowed 1. So he's sort of mimicking that here. He starts in G minor, and then he goes 5/1, and then he ends in G major, and you're going, oh, it's like a Picardy 3rd or a modally borrowed 1 chord. But he breaks the sound of G minor when we get to here, right? Like we could analyze this all in the key of G minor. Like you could, I'm going to do this. You could call this 5, 6. This is in G minor, right? And this would be 1, and this would be subtonic 7, 6, and this would be 4, right? Or wait, no, sorry, 3. I'm in the wrong key. 3, and this would be 5, 7 of 4, and this would be 4, and this would be 1 major, which is modally borrowed. The problem with this is that we just don't hear this as a 1 chord. If we're going to do this modally borrowed 1 at the end, this has to be a D chord here, which is the 5 taking us to there. It's not a plagal cadence. It's the other way around. We start pushing into the key of G minor, and then in here we're going to suddenly switch into the key of C minor right there. Okay, so up till here it sounds like we're in the key of G minor. If I go from here, we have our half cadence right there, so right, and then down here it continues on into the 6th chord by way of a 5/6, right? That's nice, right? And then you're hearing this like subtonic 7 sound, right? But then we get this, right? Suddenly there's a G7 chord, right? Which then gets us our cadence. And then, okay, there's a very short amount of time, which makes these feel a little bit strange to call them, you know, oh, I switched right there, but it's all compressed. This is a half cadence in C minor. This is my 1 chord right here. This is my 5 chord right there. And I've gone to the key of C minor. It's kind of like a G minor for just a moment, but then it goes full on C minor. And then we have a half cadence right there. Okay? And I think we're gonna call this the 5/6 of, we'll still stay ourselves in the key of B flat for a minute. So of 6, right? And this is 6, and then this would be my 5, and this would be my 1 again, right? And then if we're in the key of C minor, you can either just say we immediately change to C minor here, or you could call this be the equals my subtonic 7, one of the two, right? But here, this is my 5/6/5 in C minor, right? Like that, in a half cadence, okay? And then there's a B flat chord. So you think, are we in the key of B flat again? Is that what's working here? And I think what happens is we've moved to the dominant. Okay, so if we look at our cadence right here, we have a C7 going to an F. This is like 4/5/1 in the key of F, right? So 1. This is a C, E, G, B flat. This is breaking the key signature. This is a 5/6/5. And this is my 4 chord, and it's in first inversion because the D's in the bass. I'm thinking in the key of F, right? Okay, so I'm in the key of F here, and I have, well, it looks like another imperfect authentic cadence because this is an inverted 5 chord, and that's not the root of the 1 chord right there either. So I have an IAC right there. Let's go back and think about this then. This is 4, D minor is 6, right? And this is an F chord, so that'd be my 1, and this is another F chord, and that'd be my 1, and this is another F chord, and this is a 1, and this is a 4, this is B flat, and we're in the key of F. Now, if you want, you could say that I'm in the key of B flat again, because we hear this and it reminds us of the beginning, B flat chords and things like that. But then by the time we get here, your F becomes the 1 chord here was 5 in the old key, right? Becomes 1 right there, and we're in the key of F. So pivot chord modulation, or you can just say the whole thing is in F right there, okay? And then, see this E flat come back here? This is telling us we're going back to the key of B flat. We already know that this is a PAC, which means this is a 1 chord. This is a 5 chord with my 7th right there. It's in root position. This is my 1 chord again. Oops, sorry, 1. And it's got first inversion, so 1/6 right there. So let's just look. It immediately gives up being a 1 chord and becomes the dominant 7 version of that. So it becomes 5/2. You can call it 5/2 of 4 equals 5/2, but we're back in the key of B flat, right? And this becomes my 1/6. A is a 7 diminished chord, and it's in first inversion. Now, it's interesting here. You might think that this is a C minor chord, like C, E flat, and G, but that makes no sense between a B flat and a B flat chord in the key of B flat. This is definitely an A. That's an on the beat passing tone right there. And we have beautiful voice exchange going from do to mi and mi to do. Passing chord. It's going to be the 7 version of that. My 1 chord right there. My 7 chord again, but now the C is in the same thing. Like that. So he's just doing like tonic, dominant, tonic, dominant, tonic. Real dominant tonic. Right? He's really telling us we're ending this thing here. So It's very cool. Why C minor here and why G minor, kind of mixing these things up. If we make ourselves the box, I'm just going to do this right up here. Remember that when pieces of music from this time period, actually from here through to Brahms even, like to be traveling through different keys, you start with your home key right there. You think about the relative minor, that's where we could go. And then you can add one flat. That's a related key, closely related key, and it's relative minor. And then you can take one flat away or add one sharp, right? And these are the places that we like to explore. This is our home. Any of these other, this is almost always done. This is commonly done. And sometimes we pick another spot, and pick this one right here. So this is how Bach is playing around, right? It is possible to go to other places, but these are our first sort of options. And again, this is my most important cadences right there, which I think makes it feel like a period structure. All right. Not too much crazy stuff going on, but it's really cool to compare the two different phrases. They are harmonized, like the melody is the same, right? And yet they're harmonized so differently from each other. So rather than playing linearly through all of it, I like to take like the first phrase here, and then I go, you know, playing up here. Sorry, I'm over the piano, right? And then, right? So it's really great, right? And then we come down to this, you know, right? Like that. Then I like to play this and see how they compare. And it's so wildly different. We're going to the relative minor, not starting on a tonic, but starting on its 5. So we're like, this is the second line, same phrase, or analogous phrase, right? And then we get this sudden, you know, I like to play those side by side each other and just see how incredibly creative Bach was, and he was able to make things, you know, be more than one way. You know, when I look at a line, I've done this for a couple decades plus now, and I go, well, that line suggests these harmonies. But I'd have to scratch my head and say, if not those harmonies, then what would work? Not just what could be, but what works. And he, you know, he's worked out both of these things here, right? So we can do the same thing for this one, although it's awkward to play without a foot pedal and an organ, and I'm not even an organist, but I'll play from here, and it's like, you know, and then I gotta grab 3 notes with the left hand, which is not hard to do, but you gotta think about it, right? And then, you know, looking back and forth to the piano in this thing too. Nope, there. And then we get our modulation, right? Okay, and this is exactly the same, except instead of going up to the C, it'll go down to the A. And this is saying we're in the dominant now key, right? So it's very different. Here's starting there. Or, you know, this. And then we get these, you know, he's reestablishing that this is an F chord, right? And then it's so different. And then, right? In fact, in some ways, because this F chord is being established so prominently here, I almost feel like this is an F chord as well, and this is just a non-chord tone. Like it's an escape tone that happens here, like the escape tone that happened there. I kind of hear it that way. The D minor is kind of jarring, like this doesn't feel like it fits. So it feels like we skip down. It's all F chord. It's all being outlined everywhere else. It's just this one note right there. And so again, what was a chord tone and fit nicely into the chord schema here now feels like maybe it's a non-chord tone. I don't know. It's very cool. All right, well, it's fun. I love doing these Bach chorale analyses because they seem plain to look at. They're, you know, not simple, but then you see layers upon layers of planning and your knowledge of counterpoint and just general sense of what's permissible and what works and what doesn't grows every time you look over one of these things, right? Like we're doing part writing, free part writing in first year. second term's, almost coming to an end here, and they're learning, how to write their inside lines and things. And I'm always saying, like, look, smooth lines will get you out of problems with parallel fifths and parallel octaves and those kind of things. But we can see that Bach doesn't do that all the time. He does sometimes, like this inner line here, but then he'll skip down fine, right? But then, it's like skips way up, skips down again, right? Like he trusts his tenors to sing, and he doesn't have to be trapped by it. It's a smooth line. It doesn't have to be trapped by must stay within an octave if it suits his purposes. So that enriches everything that I think about this. It builds into like, we'll do something different because, right? And there's an assurance and a maturity that comes with the more music that you've analyzed and the more that you've looked at. All right. Well, that's enough for tonight. 26 minutes. That's kind of a short one. It's good. All right.